Good afternoon. Welcome to Higher Ed Live. It is Thursday, January 29th, 2015 at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, and this is Marketing Live. Today's topics is presidents and social media. Specifically, higher ed leaders are increasingly seeking support from their marketing and communications teams to more effectively engage and communicate on social media. So that's what we'll be talking about today. How can these teams support a university or college president in engaging on these platforms to more effectively communicate the story that their school has to tell? Marketing Live is a part of the Higher Ed Live network, offering viewers direct access to the best and brightest minds in education. Live webcasts allow viewers to share knowledge and participate in discussions around the most important issues in the industry. All episodes of Higher Ed Live are free and accessible in the video archives at higheredlive.com and in podcast format on iTunes. Higher Ed Live is produced by M. Stoner, a marketing and communications firm that works with higher education institutions on branding, strategy, web design, and more. And on February 25th, M. Stoner will host a webinar with our guest, Dan Zantz, aimed at marketing and communication units looking to help their administrators with social media strategy and use. We just sent out a tweet with the link to register. Marketing Live is sponsored by FormStack, an online form builder and your go-to tool for higher ed website conversions. FormStack makes it easy for marketers to create branded, mobile-ready web forms without writing code. Build donation forms, application forms, event registrations, and more with the web's only Section 508 compliant form builder. Interact with your audience on social media using FormStack's Facebook tab or social media autofill features. For more conversions, use FormStack's robust analytics data to refine your form. FormStack also partners with popular marketing applications so you can nurture your leads more effectively. Visit formstack.com to learn more about the ways FormStack can double your response rates and increase conversions today. Without further ado, I would like to welcome my guests to the program. Thank you very much for being here, gentlemen. My first guest is Dr. Scott Miller, who is the president of Bethany College and the M.M. Cochran Professor of Leadership Studies since the fall of 2007. Respected as one of the most entrepreneurial higher education executives in America, Dr. Miller is in his 24th year as a college president. He is active on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, and he blogs. My second guest is Dan Zantz, is the Special Projects Coordinator and a marketing professor at Seneca College in Toronto. He is the author of Follow the Leader, Lessons in Social Media Success from Higher Ed CEOs, which is available now. And welcome, gentlemen. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Pleased to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Thanks, Patrick. Glad to be here.
Great. Well, thank you once again. Let's dive right on into it. In my introduction, Dr. Miller, I know I had introduced you as being a college president for 24 years. So over those years, I'm sure you've seen things evolve, and so why don't we start off with telling me a little bit about how you see communication has evolved to the point where we are today, where presidents are tweeting, Facebooking, YouTubing, blogging, and among other things.
Yeah. Well, first of all, my undergraduate degree is in communications, so I find a fascination with this whole concept of social media. But going back to 1991, my first year as a college president, the internet hadn't come on the scene yet. Cell phones had barely arrived, and I the other day, digging through a box, found a note from a faculty member at my first institution that said, "Thank you so much for buying 2 additional fax machines to communicate on campus. We no longer have to send messengers." Boy, how times have changed. I moved into the new era of social network technology in 2007 as I was making the move to Bethany. I was at Wesley College in Dover, Delaware, which is in a city environment, and was moving to Bethany. That's a beautiful 1,300-acre campus on a mountaintop, but very rurally isolated. And as I was doing focus groups with students talking about what they like and how to communicate, social media became an important part of that strategy.
And Dan, you've spoken to college presidents really across the country, well, across North America. Um, do you see a similar acceptance of social media among that level of administration?
Yeah, well, I had the pleasure of interviewing 22 university and college presidents from across the United States and Canada as part of my research that eventually led to the book Follow the Leader. And then Dr. Miller was one of the presidents I spoke to, and the process I essentially went through was essentially reaching out to a variety of social media active presidents, primarily through Twitter, and just sort of putting out the question, how are you using social media, and well, why do you choose to engage on this platform? And the response I got was pretty overwhelming. Presidents were looking for the opportunity to sort of talk about their social media experiences, the pros and cons, and in terms of people sort of overwhelmingly singing its praises or shooting it down, I think what the sort of resounding note that I heard from the presidents that I spoke to was, look, this is a communications channel and platform that is increasingly becoming pervasive on campuses all across North America. It is, their primary constituents, the primary constituents of presidents, students in particular, are more mobile and socially driven than ever before. And so, a lot of presidents who want to engage with their constituents more effectively are increasingly looking to social media as a means of doing that.
Right. And I wonder, Dr. Miller, if you wouldn't mind sharing with us, as a president who's engaged on these platforms, maybe walk me through a typical day of the platforms you check and the things that you're trying to communicate.
Well, my primary methodology centers around Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and my blog. And those four we have found to have strong following and strong interaction. Usually I get up early in the morning before going for a run and check my Twitter account and have thought in my mind how I'm going to strategically place some different posts during the day on each of the different areas. But I'm one of those active people that I'll do tweeting and posting in between meetings, while walking across campus, while being a passenger in a car, not while driving. But the whole concept centers around, we have interlocking audiences, and on a rural campus, rural mountaintop campus, I found it to be a low-cost, efficient way to communicate with multiple constituencies, and not just communicate with them, but to engage them in the institution.
Oh, sure.
And it's interesting that Dr. Miller, brings up, the number of times per day that he'll, engage on social media. I was asked about this on Twitter earlier today. What is the right number? What is the wrong number of times to be active on social media? If you are a senior leader who, again, I'm sure Dr. Miller can speak to the demands, the multiple demands on presidents these days in terms of their time and their accountabilities and responsibilities, and invariably, a lot of the responses I give to questions like that about, what is the right way, the wrong way to operate on social media if you're a higher ed leader, invariably the answer I come to is it really depends. It really it is up to the president in particular to make that decision for themselves, to fit it into their lives in a way that makes sense in terms of their own time management, and in some cases that means you'll sort of be able to sporadically through the day check in on social media, and for other people like Chancellor Bowen Lofton at the University of Missouri, it might mean that in the morning that he dedicates about 30 minutes before he really gets his day started to catching up on his social media interaction. So it really is different for each person. I don't believe in a right and wrong way to approach social media.
Right. And one of the things I noticed in preparing for the show, Dr. Miller, I hope you don't mind, I went through your feeds and looked at your post and read what was going on there at Bethany, and I saw a mix of both personal and professional.
Right.
Do you see that as hard in drawing that line between being, a grandfather and being the president of an
Yeah.
institution using this for a very strategic purpose?
It's a very intentional strategy that we have. I mix up items that could be career advice to our students. I'll use information that I think is of interest to alums that are in the business world that are looking for certain types of information, and then package things for students as well. But and they also want to see that the person that they're communicating with is a person.
Yeah.
And I do try to personalize it with things like today is the first birthday of my only grandchild, and I'll get a lot of emails and texts back from people as a result of a posting that I did on that. It's all trying to take into account 8, 9, or 10 different audiences and balancing the information that I'm distributing so that they all feel like they have a one-on-one relationship with me, and that one-on-one relationship translates to an interest in Bethany College, whether it be sending a student here, enhancing the academic profile, involving alumni for contributions, or branding the institution on a more national basis.
Right. It's extremely humanizing, I think, is what it is, and it presents, the president of an institution who maybe years ago was thought of as, well, here's this highly educated man or woman sitting in an ivory tower making these decisions, to someone relatable, someone I could talk to and
Well,
as part of an institution.
we use student focus groups also to talk about what means are more effective than others. And I've had a surge in use, for instance, on Instagram during the last 6 months, because I find that posting and reposting, believe it or not, selfies with the president, pictures with the president, and the like are extremely popular with the student population.
Yeah.
But it's a delicate balancing act of trying to use that media which is the most effective for you to get the message out to the widest audience.
Right.
I also, sorry, Patrick. I also think
ahead.
one of the one of the neat things that President Miller does particularly well, in addition to sort of offering content for the various stakeholder groups that he communicates to, is his ability to respond to inquiries that he receives from student constituents or media outlets or alumni. That two-way engagement piece is, I think, something that President Miller and other presidents who are engaging on social media in some cases do very well. And I think that's really sort of the game-changing element of social media, as opposed to maybe some other communications channels, is that ability that it provides, that opportunity that it provides to senior leaders to actively listen to what their constituents have to say, but also to respond to those constituents in a timely fashion in order to make that particular stakeholder group or that individual feel acknowledged, feel listened to, and to sort of show that leadership at that particular institution, that particular organization, is responsive to the feedback that the stakeholder group or individual is sharing.
Yeah, you're right, Dan. And I've got this little card actually on my computer that says I want to have the most effect. My goal is to have the most effective internal communication process of any president in private higher education, because if I have an effective internal communication process, it'll drive my external strategy. And social media helps me drive that strategy. Great communication with the internal folks. We talked during the interview, Dan, months and months ago about people who want to see me post things on my social media about what they're doing. They all essentially become reporters for me. They send items that they think might be of interest, pictures that I might want to use, and that helps drive my strategy as well, the followers and the distribution strategy.
I want to kind of go back a little bit, if I could, to something that you had mentioned, Dr. Miller, and you said this a couple of times. You said, when we look at these numbers and when we talk about our strategy, and I'll ask you specifically, but then I'll also ask Dan more broadly, what types of support are you getting in engaging on social media? What type of support, and more broadly, and this is more for Dan, what type of support should college, universities, and presidents be getting if they're going to delve into these platforms? And I'll start with you, Dr. Miller.
Well, sure. First of all, every post that I do is from me. I don't have a ghost poster of any kind. But I found students to be a valuable resource in determining our strategy. I hold academic rank in the communications area here at Bethany and interact extensively with the faculty and the students in the communications and media arts area. And I have 10 students who work in my office, and they're continuously, part of their assignment with me is to identify ways that we can be more effective in our communication technique. And we have an email slot set up where, as my 10 student associates think of things that they think will be helpful, they send me something that I log, and I'll keep that idea. It might be that they think I ought to send out greetings for a good spring break on a particular date. I'll log it and record it and do it when the time comes. Or the students help drive my strategy, and I've found that they're creative in their thinking, they're energetic. They love to see items about them posted. I'll eat in the cafeteria and post that I've had dinner with the basketball team, and all of a sudden I'll see reposts and likes that zing all over campus in a number of formats. We're in the people business, and social media is a way to inspire interest in our enterprise.
And Dan, more broadly, what type of support are college university presidents receiving when it comes to developing social media strategies and engaging on these platforms?
Yeah, well, I think President Miller's sentiment about wanting his voice to sort of shine through on social media and not, rely on content provided by a ghostwriter or some kind of someone who provides him a script in terms of content to share. I think that was pretty resounding among the presidents that I spoke to. They wanted their voice to be the voice on their social media accounts, and in some cases, what we observe at certain institutions is presidents who agree to launch a Office of the President account, where it's very clear that it's not the president who's chiming in. It's also, those accounts tend to be less focused on two-way engagement. They tend to be these one-way accounts where links to press releases are being shared, and it's not so much about that that engagement with stakeholders, but rather sort of checking off that step of, well, here our president has a presence on social media, even though the engagement piece isn't where it is with some other presidents. But that notion of looking for support rather than looking for someone to take on the reins of the being that voice behind the social media account is a really key distinction that I heard from the presidents I spoke to. They were looking for people to help them to understand the norms, the sort of the normative behavior on a particular social network, whether it's Instagram or Twitter. They were looking for someone to give them an update on some of the issues being discussed on social media around their institution or around their campus. Maybe it's an ongoing issue around complaints about the food at the cafeteria, or Wi-Fi outages at the library. They were looking for people to help them to more effectively listen to the issues and concerns of their constituents, but also to deliver more compelling content. So if someone within the Office of the President or on the marketing or communications team was providing the president with key events that were happening on campus, a list of key events that were happening on campus that the president could allude to or refer to through their social media account, that was the kind of content they were looking for. As President Miller said, few of the presidents, actually none of the presidents I spoke to, really wanted someone to be tweeting on their behalf or posting to Facebook or Instagram on their behalf.
Because they know it could be fatal. Presidents understand that they're in 24/7, 365 jobs, and they want to control the message because they realize that they're constantly on the forefront in front of many different publics, and they can't take the risk of somebody else with a misstep costing them their careers.
And that's actually, you know, one of the certainly in our conversation before this webcast, and we refer to it in the book. You know, in terms of my research, what I was really looking to do was not to have a hyperbolic conversation about, you know, social media and its opportunities and risks. I didn't want to, you know, generate results that, you know, were completely skewed in terms of saying, oh yeah, everybody's got to be on social media right now. The opportunities are, you know, are guaranteed, and, you know, retention's going to skyrocket if suddenly a president's on social media, because that's not the case. You know, nothing is guaranteed, and there are risks in terms of public missteps. There are risks in terms of, you know, a president saying something that can be misconstrued, or frankly just saying something inflammatory that might not have been really well considered in terms of the repercussions, in terms of the consequences. And in the social media space, in that sphere, often those missteps are pounced on quickly, and they can gain you know, negative momentum quickly, and in some cases harm the reputation of the president or the institution. So, you know, it's not all roses and sunshine in terms of engaging on social media. There are opportunities, but there are certainly risks to acknowledge as well.
You're right, Dan, and I think presidents are shying away from conversations about hot topics, and they're wanting more structured conversations as a result of staying away from the bully pulpit. You know, back when I was a young administrator aspiring to be a college president, there were the people like Theodore Hesburgh and Jim Fisher and Steve Trachtenberg, who were the ones that were on the forefront taking on critical issues and talking about them with force. Now it seems that more and more college presidents are staying away from the bully pulpit and using scripted responses to everything. And that's really a shame, because college presidents have so much to offer, and you know, perhaps driving them out more into social media is a way to get them back on that bully pulpit.
Right.
The two biggest barriers that that sort of came through in terms of the research, two biggest barriers raised by the presidents I spoke to were time management. How do I fit this into my busy life as a president? And the second barrier was, you know, what if I make that public misstep? And one of the great responses, and Dr. Miller spoke to this as well in our interview, was this notion that as a college president, frankly, as anyone in the public sphere can attest, every day that you wake up and make any kind of a public statement, you are taking a risk that it will be misconstrued, misinterpreted, that it will be taken out of context. And so, you know, the fact that some presidents have expressed concerns about, you know, making that public misstep on social media, you know, is a bit short-sighted, in that they are really doing that in other facets of their work as presidents. You know, whether it's sending out a statement, sending out a press release, taking any kind of a position on any kind of issue. Really, what social media does is just another platform in which you would express, you know, those statements, those positions, you know, sharing, you know, your thoughts as a president.
Right, but isn't it true? You know, if you look back over time, though, colleges and universities have media relations departments. They have communications professionals. You know, not everyone comes from a communications background, like Dr. Miller, that they rely on to help guide them around those missteps. How might some of those same resources be used to guide or prevent missteps in the social space? You know, is there an opportunity there for media relations professionals, communications professionals who work there at an institution and communicate on behalf of the institution, to assist, support, to prop up, to guide college, universities, and presidents who may want to get more involved?
Dan, you want to take a shot at that, or do you?
Yeah,
I'll think for a second.
Yeah, no problem. You know what? I really see, you know, the voice of a higher ed leader on social media as being complementary to those media relations media relations teams, those staff members. This is not certainly this research and certainly the conversations I had with the presidents on social media. They were not looking to replace their media relations teams. They were looking to simply be another tool in the arsenal of their institution in terms of reaching out to sort of whether it's media stakeholders or other stakeholder groups. This was not meant to sort of replace the alumni division, the advancement division of an institution. This is just another tool in an institution's arsenal in terms of sharing key messages and advancing institutional objectives. And in terms of the kinds of support, the presidents that I spoke to were really looking for that kind of strategic rather than tactical support from their media relations teams, from their communications teams, and from within the office of the president as well. What they were looking for was not someone to, again, write tweets for them or write content for them, but rather give them a sense of the key issues. So as you're saying, what kind of guidance or counsel could a media relations professional provide? Maybe they can inform the president of a particular issue that's brewing in the media among student groups, and say, well, and advise the president before they tweet about that particular issue. Well, you want to be careful where you tread here. It could be related to government relations as well. In particular for public institutions, you might not want to talk about this particular policy, or you might in particular want to bring up this policy because it really does affect our operations. So I really think the role that strategic advisors, among other things that these advisors can do, is really provide higher ed leaders with a roadmap for, hey, you might want to avoid this particular direction, talking about this issue. You might want to bring up this particular issue. You might want to reach out to this particular reporter. I think all of this is ideally, it works in a complementary fashion. It is not meant to sort of overpower or take power away from any particular department within an institution.
Well, and to add to that, Dan, I've always had a very close relationship with our communications office, and they're great at providing input into how I tweak my strategy. But following me on social media, I'm subtly selling my followers on the value of a very traditional residential liberal arts college, and you don't see me do a whole lot on what's going on at state schools or community colleges. My intent, my content design, my tweets are to sell those who follow me on the value of the small private college in America and the benefits of learning occurring 24 hours by a student who lives on campus and interacts with faculty inside and outside of the classroom, and the benefits of the living environment that you don't get at certain types of institutions. And the strategy has subtly been developed that some of the news items and advice items that I send out are on the value of our sector, and I think it has worked rather effectively.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I think both of you kind of keyed in on this idea that the support and the knowledge transfer that's coming from communications professionals is more strategic in nature and less tactical, or at least the need is there to be less tactical, not telling you how to tweet or exactly what to tweet, but how does this align with the institution's own strategic goals when it comes to communicating its message. I think that's
so true.
And I think that also all of these, we're sort of making generalizations here, and it's hard not to, because it really does come down to a case-by-case basis. If the president in particular is taking their initial steps into social media and really requires sort of someone to sit down with them and go through, it's something that we do actually to some extent in the book as well, go through what the major players are in terms of social media networks, provide that president with counsel in terms of, well, here are the tools, here are some of the norms in terms of what is a hashtag, what are how to communicate on Twitter, how to communicate on these other social networks. I think that's also also fair, and that depending on the case and depending on the president in particular, they might be looking for that kind of counsel. So I think it really is a case-by-case basis. It really is about the onus is on strategic advisors, trusted advisors, comms and marketing people to reach out to their president and to have that sort of conversation and ask, what kind of support are you looking for? Here are some examples of presidents who are doing some really neat things on social media. Maybe we can capitalize on this as well.
Right.
I've also had, believe it or not, people from outside the institution who've been extremely helpful also. There was a president at a quite large state university who followed me on Twitter who one time said, "I noticed the resolution of your pictures that you use isn't exactly good, and you're a small college and don't have a communication staff of 26 like I do. I would suggest that you look at this because it might help you, and if you want, call my person at this number and they'll be glad to point you in the right direction." I've had some people like that that have helped me, and it's quite flattering to have a president of a school of 60,000 students who does have a communication staff of 26 saying, "I follow you, and hey, this might be helpful to you."
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Dr. Miller's story reminds me of the story of Dr. Walter Kimbrough, who's at Dillard University. We also profile Dr. Kimbrough in the book. Dillard is a smaller institution in Louisiana, and Dr. Kimbrough has really used social media as a way to promote his institution in national platforms. He's managed to get coverage for Dillard and for himself in HuffPost, in Chronicle of Higher Education, and social media has been one of the primary tools he's used to reach out to those media outlets to really tell his institutional story, whereas otherwise, I think he'd have really had a hard time, getting the word out about Dillard outside of Louisiana. So it really has changed the game for smaller institutions in particular in terms of giving their leaders a platform to tell their story in a borderless way.
Dan, to tag on to that, I agree fully. Essentially, my social media platform has been a tip sheet for newspapers, journals, and national publications of the like also. And I'm on 92 lists follow me. And I've had calls from national media where they're regionalizing or localizing a story, and they said, "We noticed you commented on that on social media, and we'd like to have an interview." There's been a lot that's come out of it as a result of that. So not just one-on-one interactions with, say, students, alumni, faculty, staff, parents, but media are using it also in order to capture ideas and to get a feel for what's going on our campuses as well.
I want to take another step back, if I could. Talking about your interaction, Dr. Miller, with this another university president kind of engaging on Twitter, because I also know, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you've spoken to new presidents as they've come on board and provided some mentorship and helping them along. Are presidents talking about this topic, social media, and specifically how they're using it? And
yes.
If you wouldn't mind shedding some light on what do you talk about when you talk about this?
Yeah, well, for 15 years I've chaired the New Presidents Program for the Council of Independent Colleges, a wonderful program that is a closed-door session, usually about 50 presidents per year that get together in early January. And CIC's program is very practical because it helps new presidents be successful, it provides them with mentors, and at the same time it tells them where the minefields are in the profession. And one thing that we do is talk about social media, and the CIC President's Institute, Council of Independent Colleges President's Institute, has the last couple years had sessions where presidents could go to just learn the basics of Twitter. And we do share with new presidents things like when you get on a listserv, that social media can also be like being on a listserv. When you see a friend of yours on a listserv or tweeting, Be careful what you communicate back, because you're not having a one-on-one communication with them. It could go out to their entire list. And there's a story that we laugh about now of a president who saw something on social media from one of his friends, and he wrote back and said, "How are you?" And the person said, "Fine." And he said, "Well, I'm glad you are, because I'm having a terrible year. I'm not getting along with my board," and went into all this thing. It was out there for the whole world to see, and it was particularly embarrassing to him. Those are the things that a lot of presidents are afraid of. And the Council of Independent Colleges and some other organizations are working carefully with new presidents and even some of the experienced ones to develop their skills in that area.
And do you see that these presidents who are new to becoming presidents, are they coming with a certain savvy already, or is there still a learning curve among this set in terms of introducing them to the platforms and some of these challenges and opportunities?
Well, I guess at age 55, I'm now starting to become one of the older presidents in the looking at it, there's still presidents out there that don't do their own email, who have assistants that do their email. So we're trying to get the younger breed of presidents into this new mode, and I forecast that within 5 years, I'm on a couple of presidents' lists on Twitter to see the names that are added every year or every day even that are coming on at differing levels. Some overfeed information, some are learning as they go along, some are signed up just to see what others are doing.
Right. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I get this sense or this vibe in talking with you and in working in the past with presidents who have been engaged and active in social media. I don't know the best way to get it other than to say some people just get it. Something in them is innate as a communicator and has that ability and has that drive and willingness to learn that it just clicks. And I'll ask you, Dr. Miller, but I'll also ask Dan, who's spoken to presidents about this. Are there people that just get it?
Well, it's partly personal and partly professional. I was a communications major in college. My first job was in newspaper writing, so I write fast, and I like news blips, and I like to get information out. Not everybody is into that. I have friends. I'm a regular columnist for Huffington Post and the State Journal and College Planning and Management and Enrollment Manager, and I have a way of writing that's much different than some presidents who take hours and then rethink it and do it over a certain period of time. So it's all up to the style of the individual. Social media is fun to me, and I view it as a college president's job to spend over half of their time friend raising. If a college president is friend raising, the funds will follow. And I use social media to excite people in my vision for the college. And you talked about it earlier, Dan, when you said some presidents have an Office of the President Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn account. People want to interact with a person, not with something that's Office of the President. And as I go around the country, we have 36 alumni groups all over the country. It's amazing when I go into those groups how many people follow me on social media and feel like they have a one-on-one relationship with me as a result of that design. And I find in moving major donors to gifts and moving alumni to increase their support that they want that relationship with the person who is developing the vision and driving the agenda of the institution.
When you talk about friend raising and making those one-on-one relationships, do you find certain platforms are better at it than others? Because I know you're active on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, blogging.
I've seen it has shifted, and for instance, using my student focus groups to advise me. 6 months, 7 months, 8 months ago, I was not very active on Instagram, and I found that the students love communicating through Instagram, and they love communicating through Twitter, less on Facebook. I also changed 4 years ago from having your basic Facebook page to a public figure like page because I wanted students to follow me on Facebook, but they were they don't necessarily want you to know where they're partying or who they're sleeping with or some of the commentary that they put up. And by doing a like page, they can follow me and I can say to them quite candidly, I'm posting things that I think are of interest to you, and you don't have to worry about me seeing all those things that you're nervous about.
Right, right.
Sorry about the technical issues there. I'm back online here, folks. Apologies for that.
No, that's all right. Welcome back. Well, I'll turn to you then, since you're back. Do you find, or in your research, did you discover college, universities, or presidents preferring one platform or over another when it comes to building these one-on-one relationships with constituents and their various audiences?
Yeah, at the time that I conducted the research, there really were clear leaders. Twitter was the most prominent tool, along with Facebook, and that was followed by blogs in terms of the primary communications platforms. But what we've seen since that research, even since the interviews I conducted, is that Instagram has really risen up as a primary tool that higher ed leaders are using. And I think that speaks to the fact that whether it's the millennial group or even the groups now, the age groups and demographics that have come after the millennials, it's just something about the visual mediums. You're seeing platforms like Vine as well, that sort of a quick hit video platform, not so much used by the presidents themselves, but used by those key demographics. And I can see eventually presidents maybe taking to platforms like that as another sort of tool in their arsenal in terms of social media engagement. But I think by far and away the leader for higher ed leaders in terms of social media engagement is on Twitter, and I think it's that opportunity to again have these very open two-way dialogues with all kinds of stakeholders, a diverse range of stakeholders, whether they are media outlets or again internal faculty and staff, students. One great story, an anecdote that I've shared on a couple of different occasions is of one Canadian college president who formed a relationship with one of the key ministers, probably the equivalent of a governor or someone responsible at the state level for post-secondary education funding. So this Canadian president formed a relationship on Twitter with this particular minister. And that relationship on Twitter turned into face-to-face meetings with that particular minister. Those face-to-face meetings helped put this particular institution and funding for that institution on the agenda of that particular minister in terms of policy, in terms of again policies that might support this particular institution. And in the following year's budget, there were specifically funds allocated for that institution, for research at that institution, that this president really credits. The nugget of that idea originating through the social media conversations that this president had with government officials. So, there are these really unique opportunities to form relationships with. I often am guilty of using this line: form relationships with people you don't have any business really speaking to on other platforms. The borders have really come down, the walls have really come down in terms of really reaching out to people you might not otherwise be able to through social media. So that's a really unique advantage that has come about.
Dan, tied to what you're saying there, one thing that we have found, I tag my Instagram account to my Flickr account, and I found that everybody wants to have their picture taken with the president. The important constituents love to have their picture, whether it's a student, a donor, a politician, they love to have their picture taken with the president. And so we use those pictures on both Facebook and Instagram, but it automatically flows over to a Flickr account where those people can download the picture themselves. We let them know that they can go to the Flickr account and download that picture. And in a lot of cases, we have a few big boxes full of Bethany branded frames for certain constituents, we'll print the picture out, frame it, and give it to them, and you'll see that legislators will keep those pictures in their office, or donors might have it on the shelf, or students who've done special things love to have the picture receiving an award or doing something with the president. And so it ties into our strategy, our internal and external communication strategy.
That's great. Well, I don't want to neglect our audience out there. I know we've gotten a couple of questions that have come through on Twitter and through chat. Well, I know we're winding down at the end, but I do want to tackle some of these questions if we could. One of them, the first one, comes from Melissa Beecher, and she just asks, are there any expectations for any communications marketing team members to be active on social media if it's an executive priority?
From what I've observed, that really depends on, the expectations of the president, in particular, of the senior executive team. If the senior executive team at a particular institution has really mandated, that social media become a priority across the institution, that institutional leaders, and whether it's on the communication side or beyond, make themselves available on social media. I think that there obviously will be more of a push for those staff members to take to social networks and engage with stakeholders. But I don't know if we're seeing so much of that push. I think it really is. I think senior leaders and I think communications professionals understand that social media really is a personal choice. It really, whether you want to sort of be active in that space or not. And that's really what we advise presidents, CEOs, senior leaders in higher education as well, that this isn't yet a requirement. Being on social media will not make or break a presidency or an institution, but what we are finding is that the president's senior leaders, communications professionals who are active on social media on behalf of their institutions, they're seeing some unique opportunities generated as a result. Again, whether that's through enhanced strategic relationships or new partnerships formed, strengthened connections with key constituency groups or stakeholder groups. Different groups on social media are seeing different benefits.
Yeah, and I think the real downside, or a downside for an institution, is when you have a president who has been extremely active on social media and the person moves to another institution. You talk about the president at Dillard who moved from one institution to another, and we, in following him, watched how his strategy shifted. We also watched as the strategy shifted when Gordon Gee made the move from Ohio State to WVU and how they shifted gears. The downside for their institutions is when you go from an extremely active social media president to all of a sudden one who doesn't embrace social media, and the constituency group is expecting to hear on a regular basis from the president, and they assume that the new president just isn't the communicator that the old one was.
Right. And that was actually one of our questions that came in. One of our audience members wanted to know what happens to that Twitter handle or Facebook page when a president does leave. And I think you gave some great examples, Dr. Miller. I know Chancellor Lofton at the University of Missouri is another one who moved from Texas A&M to the University of Missouri. And there's a certain social currency there, I would imagine. And I'm sorry, Dan, I cut you off.
Yeah, no, not at all. I think what what you're seeing in terms of many of the social media platforms that are out there is the flexibility to change usernames quite easily. What you're seeing a lot of institutions do is, in terms of the sort of the usernames for their presidential accounts, for their accounts for senior leaders, they're leaving them more generic. It'll be Webster Prez in the case of Elizabeth Strobel, so her name is not actually in that handle, and that leaves it really open to in terms of that future looking place, that future focus for the next president of Webster, that they might be able to take over that account as well. And there are transitional sort of ways to hand over an account to someone, or to change an account username. So I find a lot of communications professionals have that concern. At higher ed institutions, they have that concern about what will happen during a transition. But it's actually not as challenging as one would think. There are ways to hand over an account or to change a particular username or handle or Facebook page name if needed.
Right. Well, as we wind down here, one of the things I did want to mention, Dr. Miller, is I read a Huffington Post blog post that you had put up about New Year's resolutions for colleges and institutions. And I just want to read some of the resolutions that you cited. Be a more engaging partner. Be a good listener. Enrich the mind. If I'm thinking about this, this ties and dovetails very nicely with what social media can be, in my view. And so I wondered if, when writing this, if there's a certain lens that you come to knowing how people communicate and interact with each other today. If there was
actually that column came out of a speech. You talked about the New President's Program, a speech that I gave at the CIC New President's Program with some helpful hints. But I think if you do social media right, it can be enjoyable for you. It can be energizing. You hear some of the downside stories, but boy, I'm getting to know some of the nicest people, the nicer side of every institution through the personal connections that are created through social media, and that's energizing to me. I love going out to our alumni events and people talking with me one-on-one as if I'm a close friend as a result of the connections that have come from it. And I think more presidents, if they stepped up and did this, they would find there really is nothing to be scared of. And good judgment is the thing that you advise them, but they're in their positions because for the most part they've shown good judgment, and they should use it to their advantage.
So I'd be curious to hear Dr. Miller's thoughts on this. When I sort of think about from a wider lens what the potential impact of having a higher ed leader on social media can be, the first thing that comes to mind is that you are potentially empowering that leader with the ability to really make evidence-based decisions in terms of listening to what their core constituents have to say, and using that to inform the decision making that takes place at the highest levels of higher education institutions. Obviously you have to look at those the feedback that you hear on Twitter, on Facebook, and sort of acknowledge it proportionally. It is not reflective of every stakeholder group at your institution. It's not reflective of all students or all faculty. It's just sort of one piece of the puzzle there. But what I do think is it gives you this sample size, this sample sort of some of the key issues and concerns that those constituencies hold. And you can really use that to inform the decision making that takes place at your institution. If students are concerned about the loads of debt that they're carrying, or they're concerned about public transit to access your particular institution, and they're raising those concerns on social media, where else will a higher ed leader necessarily get that unfiltered feedback, those authentic comments that can help make an institution better? And I think social media really presents that unique opportunity.
What it also does is help the general public understand the complexity of the college presidency also. The conversations that I've had with people who, I'm an early morning tweeter. I get up and do things, and I've had people that have sent me messages at 5 o'clock in the morning just to see if it's really me that's live at that time. But they learn the early morning and late night nature of the job. They learn the extensive travel schedule that a college president puts in. They develop a better understanding and even an appreciation for their college president and for the institution and the role as a result of seeing that you might see a president at a breakfast with a donor in Pittsburgh at 7 o'clock, might be at a lunch in Maryland at noon, and might be at dinner in Washington, D.C. that evening, and somehow back on campus the next day. I've found that people have a greater appreciation for the role of the college president as a result of that.
That's great. Well, great. Well, I'll tell you what, we are just about out of time, but I did want to ask one last question, and I'm going to put a little challenge on it. I'm not going to count the characters in your response, but in a tweet, what would be the one piece of advice you would give marketing and communications professionals who want to support their college institution, president or chancellor, in engaging on social media? What's the one thing that you could say that might encourage them, that might help them develop and learn and move things forward?
Dan, you want to take a first swing?
Sure, I'll take. Sure. Why don't you hand that off to me? I'll say that we'll go. Hey, this is pretty neat. Hashtag opportunity. Hashtag this is your call. And what that sort of alludes to is the fact that there are neat opportunities here on social media, but in the end, it really does come down to a president making a choice about how engaged they want to be in terms of their leadership, how connected they want to be to their key stakeholders, and I think this is just another tool in a president's arsenal to help them to really connect with their stakeholders.
Yeah, well put. I think I've always had the philosophy that a college that's standing still is a college that's going backwards. And the same can be true in social media. Think of where we've come the last 10 years in social media. Where will we be in 5 years? Or where will we be in another 10? So it's up to the media professional to really inspire an interest with their president, to develop a confidence in it, and to motivate them to become actively involved.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you. As we wrap up the show today, I do want to say thanks again to Dr. Miller, our guest from Bethany College, and Dan Zantz, author of Follow the Leader. Feel free to pick up your copy today online. We'll tweet a link. And thanks, as always, once again, to our program sponsors. Thank you to M. Stoner. Thank you to FormStack. And with that, I am Patrick Powers. Please be sure to turn in next week for more shows on Higher Ed Live. And check out the newly designed higheredlive.com. So thank you once again. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Patrick.